His voice rose above the patter of the rain, telling her to return to the car before she caught a cold. She stood her ground, anger radiating from her. She accused him of being unfair, of playing with her feelings, of giving her hope one moment and retreating into coldness the next. He told her more firmly to get into the car, but she refused, telling him she had been foolish to think he would change, to believe his heart could warm, even slightly. She admitted she had taken his hand earlier because she thought he had finally realized he cared for her, only for him to turn back into the cold, unyielding man she had known. Liwei stood there, silent but attentive. For the first time, he saw a side of her he had never witnessed before, a fiery, unafraid version of Amara. She was no longer the soft-spoken girl who shied away from confrontation. Now she stood firmly before him, scolding him, voicing her pain without hesitation. Even knowing her words came from a place of hurt, he found himself drawn to this fierce side of her. It stirred something inside him he didn't fully understand. She looked at him, noticing the faint curve of his lips as he chuckled, and wondered if he was so cold and ruthless that he could laugh at her pain. She told him she should have stayed with Kevin. At least he had treated her like a human being. The sound of that name again tightened something deep in Liwei's chest. Without hesitation, he began walking toward her. She held her ground, ready to face him without flinching. Standing before her now, he locked his unreadable gaze onto hers, his presence overwhelming. Then, before she could finish her thoughts, his arm wrapped firmly around her waist, pulling her against him. The kiss that followed was fierce and consuming. At first, she tried to resist, her mind still tangled in frustration, but her body betrayed her. The warmth of him, the intensity of his hold, and the depth of the kiss melted every ounce of anger she carried. His lips moved against hers with an urgency that felt like it had been building for far too long, an unspoken confession of all the words he could not say. He held her tightly, as though afraid to let her go, the rain drenching them both as the world around them faded. In that moment, every trace of her frustration dissolved, replaced by a rush of emotion she couldn't fight. Their connection undeniable, fierce and unyielding. They both stood there as the rain poured over them, Liwei still holding her tightly as he kissed her, unwilling to let go. Finally, he slowed down, his forehead pressing against hers. He looked at her, and she met his gaze, both of their eyes filled with undeniable passion. Her heart pounded in her chest as he moved closer and told her that he hated it when any man got close to her, that seeing any guy even look her way, and her smiling at anyone apart from him, drove him crazy. Still holding her tightly, he told her that she belonged to him, that she was not allowed to talk about or even think of getting close to any other man, because that would drive him even more crazy. Even though it sounded like a threat, she couldn't deny the rush of emotion in her heart, the thrill of being claimed, of being wanted completely. She thought about how, despite his coldness at times, he had undeniably pulled her in and taken hold of her heart, and she knew she was willing to be his, just as he wanted her to be. He looked at her again, moving closer to her ear and whispering for her to be a good girl and go back to the car with him. Before she could respond, he put his arms around her and walked with her towards the car. They both got in and drove off together into the night. Liwei took Amara to his house. Standing in the room, she changed into something dry, her clothes still soaked from the rain. Slowly, she touched her lips as the memory of their kiss came flooding back, how it had been her very first kiss. A smile curved her lips as she replayed the moment over and over in her mind. She wondered if this meant that she and Liwei were now dating. He hadn't said anything directly about wanting to be a couple, only that she belonged to him and should stop entertaining other men. She questioned whether that was his way of claiming her as his girlfriend. While she was lost in thought, Liwei walked in. He looked at her and asked what she was thinking about. Flustered, she looked away, avoiding his eyes. He chuckled softly, moving behind her, and slowly untied her hair, beginning to dry it. She could feel his presence close behind her, and her heart itched to ask what they were now, what that kiss had meant. Before she could speak, he broke the silence. His tone was calm but firm as he told her to be careful with the people she got to know and kept around her. Amara nodded, but his eyes locked onto hers, and his tone sharpened. He reminded her that May and James were still after her, and anyone she met could be sent by them. He added that, from where he stood, she wasn't taking the situation seriously. Amara insisted that she was, but Liwei didn't seem convinced. He pointed out that she had known Kevin for a short time and was already spending time with him, even going on one-on-one outings. "What if he was sent by May and James?" he asked. She fell silent, realizing he had a point, and admitted she hadn't thought about that. She had simply assumed Kevin was a nice guy. Liwei stressed that, given her circumstances, no one could be trusted. People who seemed nice might have been sent to harm her, and she had to guard herself carefully. Amara promised to be more careful in the future. Liwei handed her the dryer, telling her she could finish on her own, and walked out, leaving her to process his words. Amara wandered into the living room and found him working on his laptop. The moment he saw her, he went into the kitchen, returning with a bowl of soup. He told her to keep warm or she might catch a cold from the rain. Sitting back down, he resumed working, his expression composed, as though the passionate moment they had shared earlier in the rain hadn't touched his heart at all. She studied him quietly, wondering if he had been replaying that kiss the way she had. Did his heart waver at all? Glancing at her, he asked if she planned to eat standing up. She quickly sat beside him and, breaking the silence, asked what he was doing. Without looking up, he told her he had asked a friend to do a background check on Kevin. Amara blinked in surprise, realizing he had taken the Kevin matter far more seriously than she thought. She told him she didn't believe Kevin was that bad, but Liwei's eyes shifted to her, his voice low and steady. He reminded her that they couldn't afford mistakes, that May and James were desperate for her heart and would stop at nothing to get it. Trusting the wrong person was a risk they could not take. Relieved that he was openly helping to protect her now, she watched him work. His sharp, flawless features caught her attention. Every part of his face was perfect, every movement precise. Liwei could feel her gaze on him. Closing his laptop, he leaned toward her. She panicked slightly, asking what he was doing. He smirked faintly, telling her that since she liked staring at his face so much, he was giving her a better look. "Take a good look until you're satisfied," he said. Shyly, she tried to look away, but he tilted her chin back, making her meet his eyes. Gathering her courage, she let her gaze linger on him. Eventually, she reached out, her fingers brushing his perfectly shaped eyebrows, tracing the straight line of his nose. His face remained as composed and cold as ever, yet he allowed her touch. As he looked at her, he wondered if letting her this close was a mistake, or if it was something he needed. She wasn't afraid of him like others were, and for a moment, he felt as if she truly saw him. Moving even closer, he asked if she was satisfied and if he could get back to what he was doing. She nodded but stopped him, saying she wanted to ask something. He told her to go ahead. Clearing her throat, she asked, "What are we?" He avoided her eyes for a moment before glancing back. She explained that they had shared a moment earlier, that he had said certain things to her, and she wanted to know what it all meant. Breaking the silence, Liwei told her she belonged to him and that he didn't like other men being close to her, or her being close to them. Still confused, she asked if that meant she was his girlfriend. He paused, as if considering her question, before saying she could interpret it however she wanted. He reminded her that he had told her before, if someone dared to get close to his heart, there would be consequences. Those consequences were that she was his now, No one was allowed to take her from him or even look her way. She looked away shyly, thinking that perhaps this was his way of confessing. It wasn't direct, but it was clear enough to her. Liwei went back to his work and she stayed beside him until she drifted to sleep. Finishing his task, he glanced at her peaceful face. Quietly, he brushed a strand of hair from her cheek and whispered that he couldn't give her the words she wanted to hear. Not yet. Telling her she belonged to him was the only way he could keep her by his side without feeling he had gone against his principles. He leaned in closer and kissed her forehead gently, and whispered again that by being by his side was the only way he could protect her. Then he lifted her into his arms, carrying her to bed and laying her down gently before leaving the room. After Liwei put Amara to bed, he stood by his balcony drinking his whiskey as usual. His gaze drifted to the sleeping pills beside him, and he wondered why they hadn't worked like they used to. Suddenly, they had stopped working, and he found it hard to sleep again. Frustrated, he grabbed his cell phone and dialed Ming's number, who was also his doctor. Ming answered, remarking that it was a miracle Liwei finally remembered he had a friend. Liwei got straight to the point, explaining that the pills Ming had given him were no longer effective. They had worked for a few days, allowing him to sleep well, but now they seemed completely useless, leaving him struggling to fall asleep. Ming explained that the pills were fine, but suggested that Liwei might have taken them too much, and his body had become used to them. He advised trying other safe methods to help him sleep, such as listening to rain sounds or using a mind-calming incense. Liwei stated that he had tried all of those methods, and none seemed to work. Ming then suggested he come to the clinic so he could assess him and recommend a solution. Liwei thanked him and hung up. He stood there, taking a sip of his whiskey. A flashback of the kiss he shared with Amara suddenly filled his mind. He chuckled to himself, questioning what was wrong with him. He set his glass down on the table and headed back inside. Stopping at a wall, he activated a hidden switch. The wall, which had appeared solid and without entrance, silently opened. He walked slowly inside and turned the switch again, causing the wall to close behind him. The room was dark, almost like a torture chamber. Liwei moved to the corner with his family photographs and lit candles. He stood there looking at the photos. His eyes landed on his father's photograph, and he stepped closer. He silently apologized for going against one of his principles. He acknowledged he had vowed he would never let anyone close to his heart until he avenged his family and took back what belonged to them. Yet he had gone against this by getting close to Amara. He promised that, even though he was forming a connection with her, he would not fully open his heart. He would keep his guard up so that he could continue focusing on his mission and not become weak. Turning to his investigation board, Liwei studied all the notes and photographs of potential suspects. He grabbed a marker from the desk and crossed out Amara's name from the list. He then put stars over May and James's names to indicate that they were next in his investigation. The fact that May's company had been awarded the maintenance tender for Eastgate University immediately after his family's death had raised his suspicions. There was clearly more going on than met the eye. Liwei then walked to a small room where a man was tied and locked in a cage, bearing the signs of enduring a lot of torture. His eyes hardened as he stared at the man. The man lifted his head, burst out laughing, and claimed that Liwei was wasting his time and would never get him to talk, even if he threatened to kill him. Liwei moved closer, his eyes red with fury, and reminded him that he was not afraid to do that. He stated that he could easily drive a dagger into his heart and end his life immediately, but instead chose to let him have a slow, painful death, until he revealed who had authorized him to create the gas leak that killed his family 10 years ago. He explained that letting him stay in the cage was an act of mercy compared to what the man had done to his family. The man remained unmoved, determined not to speak. He challenged Liwei, stating that he could investigate himself, but would find nothing because every trace of his existence had been erased. He claimed he was more like a ghost or a dead man. and keeping him there was a waste of time. He laughed again. Liwei's face and eyes hardened further, showing no emotion, yet his fury radiated like fire. The man continued, mentioning that he had overheard Liwei talking to his father about meeting a girl and going against his principles. He mocked Liwei, claiming that the innocent girl had no idea she was with a guy consumed by darkness, a devil unafraid to torture ruthlessly to achieve his revenge plot. He asked if she would still love him if she saw his true self. Liwei remained silent, knowing the man was trying to manipulate him. The man insisted that Liwei would be left alone. Just like his family, he would lose her as well. Liwei stayed expressionless, determined not to let the words affect him. He knew this man held the key to discovering the mastermind behind his family's death and vowed to make him speak, no matter how much he had to torture him. He laughed softly and moved closer to the cage, declaring that he would break the man into pieces if necessary to get the truth. With that, he left the room and went to the corner he had made for self-torture, a ritual he used to remind himself to stay focused on his mission. Every time he broke one of his principles, he punished himself to remember the importance of discipline. At that moment, he had broken a principle by getting close to Amara. He admitted to himself that he could not fully control his emotions, but considered how he could have done better in suppressing them. He sat on a chair, and connected the electric wires to his fingers. He closed his eyes slowly and switched on the current, letting the volts run through him. He scoffed in pain but endured it, knowing it was a way to remember the suffering his family had endured, the burning flesh, the ashes of his younger sister. This agony was a constant reminder of his mission. The pain he inflicted on himself was nothing compared to what his family had endured, and it strengthened his resolve to avenge their souls. He would not rest until justice was complete. The following morning, Amara slowly opened her eyes, finding herself tucked neatly in bed. A soft smile spread across her face as she realized someone must have brought her there, most likely Liwei. Hugging the pillow to her chest, she thought about how, despite his efforts to show her only his cold side, he had been gentle, attentive, and kind toward her. Rising from bed, she decided she would make breakfast for him. Making her way to the main house, she noticed Liwei's bedroom door slightly ajar. She paused, curiosity tugging at her, and peeked inside, hoping to surprise him with breakfast in bed. To her surprise, his bed was perfectly made, as though no one had slept there. He must have gotten up early, she thought, brushing the notion aside as she headed to the kitchen. Meanwhile, in the torture room, Liwei slowly opened his eyes. His entire body ached, his face pale from the punishment he had inflicted on himself. He staggered to his feet and moved toward the exit. Activating the hidden switch, the wall creaked open just enough for him to slip through. He paused when he saw Amara in the kitchen, her back to him, humming quietly as she worked. She was so absorbed in the moment, so visibly at ease, that he stood silently, watching her, seeing her slowly let go of her worries, watching her smile and enjoy life in this small, ordinary way. Relief washed over him. At least here he could protect her from the darkness surrounding them both. Yet his thoughts drifted to the man in the cage and the words he had spoken. Would Amara still love him if she ever discovered this ruthless side of him, the side consumed by vengeance, unafraid to do anything to complete his mission? Would she run, never looking back? She suddenly turned and recognized his presence. Without hesitation, she rushed to him, placing her hand on his forehead, concern etched across her face. She asked if he was feeling unwell, noting that he looked pale and not himself. Liwei reassured her calmly, claiming it was merely a cold that would pass in a few days. She suggested it might be from the rain and offered to make him a remedy, but he stopped her, insisting there was no need. He told her he would freshen up before joining her for breakfast. She nodded and watched him walk away, her smile lingering. Later, they sat together at the breakfast table. Amara watched him carefully, Curious to see his reaction to the pancakes she had made, Liwei nodded in approval but remained focused on his food, his expression unreadable as ever. She had thought that their closeness would soften him, allow glimpses of warmth, but his face revealed nothing. Breaking the silence, Amara suggested that, since she was now his, he should try to make his expression more welcoming for her, while maintaining his cold exterior for others. Liwei looked at her silently before stating that, after everything that had happened to his family, there was no reason for him to smile more. Disappointed, Amara murmured that at least she should be the reason for his smile. Hearing her, Liwei's gaze softened slightly. He told her to give it time, and maybe one day she would be the first to see him truly happy, even smiling. Amara's smile grew wider. She teased that he must look even more handsome when he smiled. Liwei chuckled softly, then rose to clear the plates. As he moved to leave, Amara expressed her worry about facing Kevin at school, wondering what she would say. At the mention of the name, Liwei froze, his expression hardening, visibly jealous. He set down the plates, swiftly took her hands, and held her close. His gaze was intense, piercing into hers. Amara noticed the faint flare of jealousy in his eyes, and rather than fear, she found it endearing. She couldn't help but laugh softly. Liwei's gaze never wavered. Without a word, he leaned in closer and pressed his lips against her neck, deliberately leaving a love bite. Her heart raced. She asked what he was doing, but he only chuckled and told her that now she was free to go and talk to Kevin, so he could see that he had marked his territory and that she was his woman now. He released her gently, instructing her to get ready so he could take her back to school. Amara stood there, her hand brushing over her neck, thinking about his territorial, yet undeniably affectionate way of expressing love, and how, despite it all, she found him utterly captivating.